The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber burst open. Earth's ambassador walked out with heavy steps, his face red with anger. Behind him, the alien council members whispered among themselves, their many eyes wide with surprise. No one had ever dared to leave a council meeting like this before. "Ambassador, please return to your seat," a soft voice called from inside. "We can discuss this matter calmly." The ambassador didn't even look back. "There is nothing left to discuss," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "Earth will not forget this betrayal." 3 months earlier, Admiral James Walker stood at the window of his office on Luna Base, looking at the blue marble of Earth hanging in the black sky. The datapad in his hand felt heavy, even in the moon's low gravity. What he had just read made his stomach turn. "Sir," his assistant knocked on the door. "Dr. Ross is here with the full report." Walker turned around. "Send her in." Dr. Emma Ross walked into the office, carrying more datapads. Her usually neat hair was messy, and dark circles showed under her eyes. She hadn't slept in days, not since they first discovered the truth. "It's worse than we thought, Admiral," she said, placing the datapads on his desk. "The Council hasn't just been watching us. They've been changing us. Trying to change us, at least." Walker sat down heavily in his chair. "How long?" "Centuries, maybe longer." Emma brought up a holographic display showing DNA structures. "They've been introducing small genetic changes into our population. Their goal was to make humans less aggressive, more controllable." "The plagues," Walker said, remembering the devastating diseases that had swept across Earth in the past century. "They weren't natural, were they?" Emma shook her head. "No, they were tools. Every time a plague hit, it carried their genetic modifications. They made it look like natural disasters, but it was all planned." She zoomed in on part of the DNA display. The latest attempt was the gray fever outbreak of 2184. Walker remembered that year clearly. His sister had died in that outbreak, along with millions of others. His hands gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. "But they failed, didn't they?" he asked, looking at the complicated patterns floating in the air. "We're still here, still fighting." Emma smiled for the first time in days. "That's the interesting part. Humans are different. Our DNA doesn't work quite like other species. Every time they tried to make us more docile, our bodies adapted. Instead of becoming weaker, we became stronger." She pulled up another image, showing human DNA from different time periods. "See these patterns? Every modification they made, our DNA took it and turned it into something else. Better immune systems, faster healing, quicker thinking. They wanted to cage us, but they only made us better." Walker stood up and walked back to the window. Earth looked peaceful from up here. Its people had no idea what had been done to them, what was still being done to them. "Who else knows about this?" he asked. "Just the top levels of government and military, and the medical research team that made the discovery." Emma came to stand beside him. "The Council doesn't know we found out. They think their latest guidance program is working perfectly." Walker nodded slowly. A plan was already forming in his mind. "Keep it that way. Let them think we're becoming exactly what they want." He turned to face Emma. "But I want everything you have on their genetic programs, every detail, every weakness." "What are you thinking, Admiral?" "I'm thinking it's time to show the Council exactly what happens when you try to cage humanity." He looked back at Earth, his jaw set firmly. "They wanted to make us less dangerous. They're about to learn just how dangerous we can be." In his office on Luna Base, as Earth hung silently in the black sky, Admiral Walker began planning humanity's revenge. The Council had spent centuries trying to break humanity's spirit. Now they would learn that some spirits can't be broken. They can only be made stronger. And 3 months later, as Earth's ambassador stormed out of the Council chambers, the first pieces of that plan were already in motion. Deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, Admiral Walker stood in front of a room full of Earth's top military leaders. The old bunker, built centuries ago, was one of the few places completely safe from the Council's watching eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, pointing to the holographic display behind him, "this is how we hit back." The display showed a map of known Council space, with dozens of red dots marking their research facilities. Each dot represented a place where they had developed their weapons against humanity. Each dot was now a target. "Sir," Commander Reed spoke up from the front row, "won't they detect our fleet movements?" Walker smiled. "They won't, because we're not moving fleets." He pressed a button, and the display changed to show a new kind of ship. It was small, dark, and looked nothing like normal human vessels. "Dr. Ross, would you explain?" Emma stepped forward. She hadn't slept much in the past weeks, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "These are what we call ghost ships," she said. "We built them using the Council's own stealth technology. Technology they think we're too primitive to understand." The room filled with quiet laughter. The Council had always treated humans like children, giving them only the simplest technologies. They never realized that humans could take those simple pieces and build something new. "But the ships are only part of the plan," Emma continued. She brought up another image, showing a strange-looking virus. "This is their own weapon, turned against them. Remember how their genetic attacks made us stronger? We've learned how to do the same thing to their viruses." An admiral in the back raised his hand. "Are you saying we can use their biological weapons against them?" "Better than that," Emma replied. "We can use their own biology against them. Their DNA doesn't adapt like ours. When we send their modified viruses back, they'll have no defense." Walker took over again. "We've already begun moving the ghost ships into position. The Council thinks we're busy with our usual trade routes. Meanwhile," he pressed another button, and the display showed hundreds of small dots moving through Council space. "We're everywhere." The room grew quiet as the military leaders realized the scale of the plan. They were used to direct battles, ship against ship. This was something else. A shadow war fought with the Council's own weapons. "What about their allies?" someone asked. Walker nodded to a woman sitting quietly in the corner. She stood up, and everyone recognized her as the head of Earth's intelligence service. "Several younger races in the Council are already sympathetic to us," she said. "They've suffered from the Council's guidance too. When we strike, they'll stand aside." "And the ones who don't?" Commander Reed asked. "Then they learn why the Council wanted to make us less dangerous in the first place," Walker said firmly. The meeting continued for hours as they went over every detail of the plan. Ships to position, weapons to prepare, allies to contact. Through it all, Walker watched his people work with pride. The Council thought they had made humanity soft and weak. Instead, they had created their own worst nightmare. Later, in a private room, Emma found Walker looking at an old photograph. It showed his sister, smiling at the camera before the gray fever took her. "We're almost ready," Emma said softly. "The first ghost ships will be in position next week." Walker nodded without looking up. "Do you ever wonder if we're proving them right? Showing them that humans really are too dangerous?" Emma put her hand on his shoulder. "They didn't try to make us less dangerous because they were right. They did it because they were afraid. And now they're going to learn that their fear was justified." Walker finally looked up, putting the photograph away. "Send the signal to all ghost ships," he said. "Operation Shadow Strike begins in 7 days." As they left the mountain bunker, the sun was setting over Earth. Soon, very soon, a new day would dawn. And when it did, the Council would learn that some creatures become most dangerous when you try to cage them. The ghost ship floated silently in space, invisible to the Council's sensors. Through its viewing window, Admiral Walker watched the massive research station spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars. This was the place where they had designed the Gray Fever, where they had planned how to break humanity. "All ships in position." Commander Reed's voice came through the secure channel. "Waiting for your order, sir." Walker looked at the station again. In a few minutes, it would become a battlefield. "Dr. Ross, status of the virus." Emma's voice was calm and clear. Delivery systems ready. The moment their shields drop, we can release it into their air system. Remember, Walker said to all channels, we want prisoners. The scientists in there know things we need to know. He took a deep breath. Begin Operation Shadow Strike. All ships, go dark. Across Council space, 300 ghost ships switched off all non-essential systems. In the darkness of space, they were now truly invisible. The attack began with a whisper, not a roar. The station's shields flickered for just a second, a normal power fluctuation that happened every day. But this time, the flicker lasted a fraction of a second longer. Through that tiny gap, hundreds of microscopic drones slipped in, carrying Emma's modified virus. Package delivered, Emma reported. Time to effect. 3 minutes. Walker watched the station through his window. On the surface, nothing had changed. Inside, the virus was already spreading through the air vents. It wouldn't kill anyone. That wasn't the plan. Instead, it would do something far more useful. Sir, Reed called, we're detecting internal communications. They're panicking. Walker nodded. The virus was doing its job, making the Council scientists unable to lie. Every secret they had kept, every experiment they had hidden, was now spilling from their mouths uncontrollably. All ships, Phase 2, Walker ordered. Breach and capture. The ghost ships appeared from nowhere, surrounding the station. Their dark hulls absorbed the few desperate shots fired by the station's defense systems. Boarding pods launched, carrying teams of Earth's best soldiers. Central control is secured, a team leader reported. The station commander is, Sir, he's confessing to everything. Can't stop talking about their experiments. More reports flooded in. Lab after lab captured. Database after database secured. The Council's greatest research station was falling, not to violence, but to truth. Emma's voice came through again, excited. Admiral, you need to see this. The data they kept here, it's not just about humans. They'd been experimenting on dozens of species. Walker's eyes narrowed. Download everything. And make sure our allies get copies. The battle, if it could be called that, was over in less than an hour. The station's staff, still unable to stop telling the truth, were locked in their quarters. The databases were copied, and in the labs, Emma's team was already going through decades of hidden research. Sir, Reed called, we're getting signals from the other strike teams. All targets secured, minimal resistance. He paused. The Council, they never thought we could do this. Their security was focused on stopping big attacks. They never looked for something small. Walker allowed himself a small smile. Sometimes the smallest cut goes deepest, Commander. He turned to Emma, who was buried in the station's data. What have you found? She looked up, her face pale. Everything, James. Records going back centuries. Every experiment, every test, every species they tried to improve. And she swallowed hard. We weren't their first victims, just the first ones to fight back. Walker nodded slowly. Send word to Earth. Tell them Phase 1 is complete. He looked out at the captured station, now dark and quiet. And get me a channel to our allies. They deserve to know what was done to their people. As the ghost ships secured their prize, Walker thought about how the Council would react. They would be angry, yes. They would try to fight back. But for the first time in their long history, they would know fear. And they would learn that their fear had created exactly what they had tried to prevent. A humanity that was done being controlled. Red lights flashed across Luna Base as Admiral Walker ran to the command center. The Council's response had finally come, and it was bigger than anyone had expected. Status report, he shouted as he entered the room. Commander Reed looked up from his display, his face grim. 500 Council warships just appeared at the edge of our solar system. They're carrying something in their cargo holds. Our sensors show biological weapons. lots of them. Emma was already working at her station, analyzing the data. They're using everything, Admiral. Every virus, every plague they ever created. They're desperate. Walker watched the tactical display as the Council fleet moved closer to Earth. They were moving in a standard attack formation, exactly as their military manuals taught. Predictable. Limited. Launch our defense fleet, Walker ordered. Standard pattern Delta. Make it look like we're panicking. Earth's ships rushed out to meet the Council fleet, appearing disorganized and scared. The Council commanders must have smiled when they saw this. It was exactly what they expected from a primitive species. They never saw the real threat coming. Ghost ships in position, Reed reported quietly, waiting for the Council fleet to commit. The Council ships pressed their advantage, pushing Earth's fleet back. Their cargo holds opened, preparing to release their biological weapons into Earth's atmosphere. Walker's eyes narrowed. Now, around the Council fleet, 300 ghost ships dropped their cloaks. But they weren't the small raiders from the first attack. These were battleships, upgraded with technology stolen from the Council's own research stations. Release the counter-virus, Walker commanded. Emma pressed a button on her console. From the ghost ships, a cloud of microscopic machines spread out. They carried the same truth virus as before, but this time it was different. Enhanced. Weaponized. Sir, Reed called out. The Council ships, their crews are being affected. They're turning on each other. The tactical display told the story. Council ships began firing on their own fleet. Crews who could only tell the truth were revealing centuries of lies and betrayals. Ancient rivalries between Council races burst into violence. Their biological weapons? Walker asked. Emma smiled. Useless. Their own research helped us design defenses. And she checked her readings. Yes, the countervirus is spreading through their fleet. Every ship it touches becomes a carrier, infecting more ships. The Council fleet was in chaos. Ships either turned on each other or tried to flee. Their perfect formation broke apart like leaves in a storm. Message from the Council flagship, Reed reported. They're begging to surrender. Walker shook his head. No, not yet. He opened a channel to the Council commander. You tried to break us, to make us weak. But every virus you used, every plague you created, only made us stronger. Now watch what real strength looks like. He turned to Emma. Release Phase 2. Emma nodded and entered a command. Across the Council fleet, ships suddenly lost power. The stolen research hadn't just given Earth weapons, it had given them backdoor access to Council technology. Their weapons are disabled, Reed reported. Life support is still working, but they're helpless. Walker looked at the tactical display, now showing hundreds of dead-in-space Council ships. Send in the boarding teams. I want every piece of data from their computers, every secret they've kept, every species they've tried to control. As Earth's ships moved in to capture the Council fleet, more messages arrived from across the galaxy. Other species, inspired by Earth's victory, were rising up against their Council masters. The carefully built web of lies and control was falling apart. Sir, Emma called out softly. Look. On her screen was a message from one of the younger Council races. It read simply, "Thank you for showing us we can fight back." Walker smiled. The Council had spent centuries trying to make humanity safe and predictable. Instead, they had created the force that would bring their empire crashing down. And this was only the beginning. The Great Council chamber was in chaos. Hundreds of alien representatives shouted and argued as more evidence appeared on their screens. Every secret, every experiment, every lie the Council had kept hidden for centuries was now playing across the galaxy's information networks. Admiral Walker stood at the speaker's podium, his voice cutting through the noise. For 1,000 years, you claimed to guide us, to help us. Instead, you treated us like lab animals. Behind him, Dr. Emma Ross operated the display system. Images flashed across the chamber's massive screens. Secret laboratories, genetic experiments, failed tests. The evidence they had gathered from the captured research stations. But humans weren't your only victims, Walker continued. He nodded to Emma, who brought up new files. Look at what they did to your own people. The shouting stopped. In the sudden silence, representatives from dozens of worlds stared at their screens in horror. The Council's experiments hadn't started with humans. They had been modifying species for thousands of years. An alien diplomat from one of the younger races stood up, his scaled skin pale with anger. The plague that killed millions of my people 3 centuries ago. You caused that. The Council leader tried to speak, but the truth virus still running through his system forced out the real answer. Yes, your species was too independent, too curious. We needed to make you easier to control. More revelations followed, more secrets exposed. Emma had spent days organizing the evidence, making sure every species saw what had been done to their people. The Council's careful web of control was unraveling thread by thread. The humans have violated Council law. One of the senior Council members shouted. They stole our research. They attacked our stations. Walker smiled coldly. Your laws. The laws you created to keep us weak. He pressed a button on the podium, and new images appeared. These are the results of your latest experiment, a virus designed to make humans more peaceful, more obedient. The images showed hospitals full of sick people, children struggling to breathe, Walker's own sister lost to their engineered plague. But something went wrong, didn't it? Emma stepped forward. Human DNA didn't react the way you expected. Instead of making us weaker, she brought up complex genetic diagrams. Each attack made us stronger, better able to fight back. Representatives from the older Council races were trying to leave the chamber now. But Earth's soldiers stood at every exit, their weapons ready. No one leaves, Walker said firmly. Not until everything is exposed. Not until every species knows what was done to them. A message flashed on Emma's tablet. She showed it to Walker, smiling. More Council research stations had been captured. More evidence was pouring in. And more species were joining Earth's cause. Your empire was built on lies, Walker told the Council leaders. Built on the pain and suffering of those you claim to protect. But lies have a weakness. He looked around the chamber. They fall apart when exposed to the truth. One by one, representatives of younger races stood up. They had seen the evidence. They had heard the Council's own confessions. Now they were making their choice. The trading worlds withdraw from the Council, one announced. The Star Alliance stands with Earth, declared another. The Rim colonies demand justice for these crimes, a third proclaimed. The Council leaders watched helplessly as their power crumbled. The truth virus prevented them from spinning new lies, from making false promises. They could only sit and watch as centuries of control slipped away. Emma touched Walker's arm, showing him another message. The outer colonies are revolting, she whispered, and the Council's own military is standing down. They've seen the evidence too. Walker nodded. The Council had spent centuries trying to make other species safer, more controllable. But they had forgotten something important. Truth was the most powerful weapon of all. And now that weapon was tearing their empire apart. The Council's capital world hung in space like a jewel, its golden towers reaching toward the stars. For thousands of years, it had been the center of galactic power. Now it was the last stronghold of a dying empire. Admiral Walker stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the combined fleet gather around the planet. Ships from 24 liberated species had joined Earth's forces. The Council's lies had united the galaxy against them. Final report, Commander Reed said, checking his displays. The Council has activated their planetary shields. They've got about 300 ships left, all packed with their most loyal crews. Emma rushed onto the bridge, holding her tablet. James, we've got a problem. The Council's scientists, they're working on something big, something desperate. Walker turned to her. What kind of weapon? They're trying to modify our truth virus, she explained, showing him the data. Turn it into something deadly. If they succeed, it could kill everyone it infects, human and alien alike. Walker's jaw tightened. Even now, the Council was still trying to control life itself. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. Emma's fingers flew over her tablet. They got their best minds working on it, and they've got nothing left to lose. Walker opened a channel to all ships. This ends now. All forces, battle positions. We're going in. The combined fleet moved forward, Earth's ships in the lead. The Council's remaining forces rose to meet them, forming a defensive wall around their capital. "Sir," Reed called out, receiving a message from the Council leader. The leader's face appeared on the main screen. Even through the truth virus, his arrogance showed. "Stand down, Admiral. You've made your point. We're willing to negotiate." "Negotiate?" Walker laughed coldly. "Like you negotiated with all the species you experimented on. No, surrender, and maybe we'll let you live." "You fool," the leader snarled. "We guided the galaxy for thousands of years. Without us, there will be chaos. Better chaos than your kind of order." Walker cut the transmission. "All ships, engage. Priority targets are their research centers. Don't let them finish that weapon." The battle erupted across space. Council ships fought with the desperation of those who knew they had no future. But the combined fleet had something stronger: the fury of those who had been betrayed. "Ghost ships, begin your run," Walker commanded. Around the planet, Earth's stealth ships appeared from nowhere. While the main battle raged, they slipped through gaps in the planetary shields, heading for the research centers. "Emma, start the hack," Walker ordered. She nodded, connecting to the ghost ship systems. The same backdoors they used against the Council's fleet would now let them into the planetary defenses. "Sir," Reed shouted. Energy spike from the main research center. There, a massive beam of energy shot from the planet's surface, cutting through several ships in the combined fleet. The Council's weapon wasn't finished, but they were using it anyway. "Multiple hull breaches," someone reported. "They're targeting our lid ships." Walker grabbed the command rail as his ship shook. "Emma, status of the hack." "Almost there," she said through gritted teeth. "Their security is stronger here, but got it." Across the planet, defense systems began shutting down. Shield generators failed. Weapon platforms went dark. The Council's own technology was turning against them. "All forces," Walker commanded, "begin landing operations. Take those research centers. Don't let them complete that weapon." The battle for the capital lasted 3 hours. Street by street, building by building, the combined forces pushed toward the Council's strongholds. The ghost ships teams reached the research centers just in time, stopping the weapon's completion with minutes to spare. Finally, in the great Council chamber itself, Walker faced the leader one last time. "You could have joined us," the leader said, his voice shaking with the truth virus's effects. "Been part of our grand design." Walker shook his head. "Your design was based on control and fear. It's time for something new." As Earth's soldiers led the Council leaders away, Emma joined Walker at the chamber's window. Below them, the capital city was already changing. The golden towers that had symbolized the Council's power were being torn down. "It's really over," she said softly. "No," Walker replied, watching the sun rise over the new galaxy they had helped create. "It's just beginning." 1 year after the Council's fall, Admiral Walker stood in the newly built Alliance chamber. The room was different from the old Council chamber in every way. Instead of towering golden walls meant to intimidate, the chamber was built in a circle, with every seat at the same level. No species stood above another here. "The medical reports are ready," Emma said, joining him at the window. She looked different now, more confident, more relaxed. The weight of the Council's secrets no longer haunted her eyes. "How many species were affected?" Walker asked. 43. She handed him her tablet. The Council's experiments went back almost 10,000 years. Some species were modified so long ago, they thought their altered genes were natural. Around them, representatives from across the galaxy filled the chamber. Many were former Council worlds, but others were new, species that had hidden from the Council's control, now free to join galactic society. Commander Reed entered, carrying more reports. "The trials are proceeding, sir. The Council leader's truth virus is still working. They can't hide anything anymore." Walker nodded. After the battle, they had decided not to cure the Council leaders of the truth virus. Their punishment was to live with the one thing they had always feared: absolute honesty. "And the restoration project?" he asked. Emma smiled proudly. "Better than we hoped. Now that we understand the Council's genetic technology, we can help species recover their original traits. It's voluntary. Of course, some want to keep the changes, others want to undo them." The chamber's main display lit up, showing a map of known space. The old Council borders were gone, replaced by new trade routes and alliance zones. Species that had once been kept apart by Council law were now working together, sharing ideas and technologies. "Message from the outer colonies," Reed reported. "The terraforming project is working. Worlds the Council said were impossible to settle are now supporting life." Walker remembered how the Council had restricted terraforming technology, claiming it was too dangerous for younger species. Like everything else that had been a lie, the technology wasn't dangerous, it was liberating. A soft chime indicated the start of the day's session. Representatives took their seats as the Alliance speaker stood up. She was from one of the youngest species, someone who would never have had power under the old Council. "Today marks 1 year since the liberation," she announced. 1 year since Earth showed us that even the oldest chains can be broken." The chamber filled with applause. Walker saw representatives from dozens of species, some humanoid, some completely alien, united not by force or fear, but by choice. "The human spirit of defiance," the speaker continued, "taught us all something important. Control does not bring peace. True peace comes from freedom, from cooperation, from trust." Emma touched Walker's arm, showing him another message on her tablet. The first graduates of the new Alliance Science Academy were ready, young minds from across the galaxy, learning to use science to help rather than control. "We're tracking something interesting," Reed whispered. "Remember how the Council's genetic tampering made humans more adaptable? The same thing is happening with our allies. Working together, sharing knowledge, we're all becoming stronger." Walker watched as the Alliance members discussed new projects, new discoveries, new ways of working together. The Council had spent thousands of years trying to make the galaxy safe by making its people weak. In just 1 year, freedom had accomplished more than their control ever had. "There's still so much to do," Emma said, looking at the stars visible through the chamber's crystal dome. "So many worlds to heal, so much damage to undo." "But we'll do it together," Walker replied. "Not because we're forced to, but because we choose to." As the session continued, Walker thought about everything that had changed. The Council had tried to break humanity's spirit, but they had only proved what that spirit could achieve. Their revenge hadn't just been about making the Council pay. It had been about showing the galaxy a better way. And as he watched the new alliance at work, Walker knew that the Council's greatest fear had come true. They had lost control. But in losing control, the galaxy had found something far more powerful. It had found freedom.